How Knights Stayed Warm Inside. How Knights Stayed Warm Inside Frozen Medieval Castles. Chapter 1. Introduction. The medieval period, roughly spanning the 5th to the late 15th century, is often remembered for knights, castles, and epic battles. However, life within these massive stone fortresses was not just about warfare or chivalry. It was also about survival, especially during the cold winters. Castles were designed primarily for defense, not comfort, and their stone walls and lofty halls were notoriously difficult to heat. Despite the harsh conditions, knights and castle residents developed numerous strategies to stay warm. These included architectural adaptations, clever heating methods, layered clothing, and lifestyle adjustments. This report explores these strategies in depth, offering a detailed look at how medieval people coped with freezing temperatures inside stone fortresses. By examining both material and social approaches to warmth, we gain insight into daily life in the medieval world. The image of the medieval castle is one that often captures the imagination. Towering stone walls, narrow arrow slits, massive wooden doors reinforced with iron, and the ever-present presence of armored knights on duty. Castles evoke a sense of power, strategy, and the hierarchical structure of medieval society. They were fortresses of defense, centers of governance, and symbols of wealth and prestige. However, behind the grandeur and strategic brilliance lay a far more human concern. Survival within these imposing stone walls, particularly during the long and harsh winters of medieval Europe. The challenge of staying warm in a massive, drafty, and largely unheated structure was not merely a matter of comfort. It was an essential aspect of daily life, influencing health, social structures, and even military readiness. Knights, despite their armor and status, faced the same elemental hardships as the rest of the castle's residents. The European medieval climate presented numerous challenges to those living in castles. Winters were long and cold, with temperatures often dropping well below freezing in many regions. Stone, the primary building material for castles, was ideal for defense but disastrous for warmth. Thick walls absorbed the cold, and heat generated by a fire dissipated quickly. High ceilings, large halls, and open corridors allowed cold air to circulate freely, making it difficult to maintain even a modestly warm interior. Early castles often lacked chimneys, so smoke from fireplaces filled rooms and escaped inefficiently through roof openings, while much of the heat escaped alongside it. The daily experience of castle life, therefore, involved constant exposure to cold, drafts, and icy floors. Yet medieval inhabitants, including knights, did not simply resign themselves to suffering through winter. Instead, they developed ingenious and practical methods to endure the cold. These strategies were a combination of architectural design, technological innovation, clothing choices, lifestyle adaptations, and social structures. Each of these elements worked in tandem to allow life to continue, even when snow blanketed the surrounding lands and frost clung to the castle walls. Architecture played a crucial role in medieval heating. Castles were designed primarily for defense, not comfort, but this did not mean that medieval builders were unaware of the human need for warmth. Thick stone walls, while cold, were sometimes complemented by small, well-placed windows to minimize drafts. Fireplaces, which evolved over the centuries from simple hearths to more sophisticated designs with chimneys, became central to daily life. Tapestries and wall hangings were used not only as decoration, but also as insulation, helping to trap the heat generated by fires. Floors were often covered with rushes, straw, or rugs to reduce the chilling effect of stone underfoot. Beds raised on wooden frames and surrounded by curtains provided further protection from drafts. These architectural features, combined with careful placement of fires and living spaces, demonstrate the medieval understanding of both practical comfort and social hierarchy. Wealthier knights and lords had access to multiple fireplaces, private chambers, and expensive furnishings, while lower-ranking soldiers and servants relied on communal areas and portable heat sources such as braziers. Clothing was another vital component of warmth. Medieval attire was carefully layered, combining undergarments of linen with woolen outer layers. Wealthier knights could afford fur-lined cloaks, padded garments, and thick gloves, while ordinary soldiers or servants made do with simpler layers of wool and linen. Knights wore padded garments known as gamisons beneath their armor, which provided not only protection, but also an insulating layer against the cold. Hats, gloves, and thick socks were essential to prevent heat loss through extremities, which is where the human body loses warmth most rapidly. Layering sea clothing was an art in itself, balancing mobility, protection, and warmth, particularly for those expected to engage in physical activity while on duty. The daily routines of knights and castle residents were also adapted to cope with the cold. Activities were often centered around the hearth, and social gatherings, meals, and administrative duties took place in the warmest parts of the castle. Sleeping arrangements reflected both social status and practical needs. Communal sleeping provided shared warmth, while wealthier knights and nobles could afford heated private chambers. Physical activity, including chores, guard duty, and training, contributed to body heat, while hearty diets of stews, soups, and ale provided the calories necessary to withstand cold temperatures. Even the scheduling of outdoor activities was influenced by seasonal changes, with winter routines prioritizing indoor work, fire tending, and maintenance of warmth. Fuel availability played a significant role in medieval heating strategies. Wood, charcoal, and peat were the primary sources of heat, and securing enough fuel for the winter was a critical aspect of castle management. Wealthy households could afford continuous fires and extensive fuel stores, while poorer residents had to ration heat carefully. This reliance on fuel also influenced social hierarchy, as access to warmth was both a practical and symbolic marker of status. The interplay of resources, social structure, and daily routines reflects the complex strategies medieval people developed to survive in cold stone fortresses. Medieval castles varied greatly depending on their location, size, and period of construction. In early castles, heating was rudimentary, often limited to a single hearth in the main hall. Later castles incorporated multiple fireplaces, private chambers, and early forms of chimney systems. Portable braziers supplemented fixed hearths, allowing residents to carry warmth to different rooms. Tapestries and textiles evolved in quality and quantity, serving both aesthetic and insulating purposes. Some castles, particularly in colder regions, implemented specialized architectural features, such as thick walls with cavity layers, insulated floors, and strategic room layouts to conserve heat. These developments highlight the ongoing interplay between defensive needs and human comfort. Historical accounts and surviving records provide glimpses into the daily experience of knights during winter. Chronicles describe fully dressed sleeping arrangements, the constant maintenance of fires, and the use of heavy bedding and curtains. Inventory records reveal the value placed on furs, blankets, and tapestries, indicating their importance not just for decoration, but for practical warmth. These sources show that medieval survival was a combination of preparation, social cooperation, and ingenuity, particularly when faced with freezing temperatures inside stone fortresses. Understanding how knights stayed warm inside castles also provides insight into broader medieval society. The strategies for warmth reflect technological innovation, economic resources, and social hierarchy. Wealthy lords had access to the best heating, clothing, and bedding, while ordinary knights and soldiers relied on shared resources and ingenuity. This disparity illustrates how daily survival in the Middle Ages was closely linked to social and economic status. Moreover, the adaptations developed to endure the cold influenced architectural styles, domestic routines, and even military readiness, as a well-rested and warm garrison was more effective in defense. In addition to architecture and clothing, the psychology of warmth played a role. Medieval people understood, even without modern scientific knowledge, the importance of maintaining body heat for health and endurance. Cold was associated with illness, discomfort, and decreased productivity. Fires, shared sleeping arrangements, and layered clothing were not merely conveniences. They were essential survival tools. The cultural emphasis on hospitality and care within castles further reinforced the importance of warmth, as providing adequate heat for guests and retainers was both a social expectation and a practical necessity. The ingenuity of medieval people in coping with cold also reflects a broader theme of adaptation to environmental challenges. Life in a frozen stone fortress demanded constant attention to detail, from monitoring fires and fuel supplies to selecting appropriate clothing and managing communal spaces. These strategies were a testament to human resourcefulness and resilience, allowing knights and castle residents to endure winters that might otherwise have been debilitating. Finally, examining the ways knights stayed warm provides a more nuanced understanding of medieval life. Castles are often romanticized as centers of chivalry and warfare, but the everyday realities of cold, hunger, and comfort shape the lived experience of those within their walls. The intersection of architecture, technology, clothing, social hierarchy, and daily routines reveals a world in which survival depended as much on practical knowledge as on martial skill. By studying these strategies, historians and enthusiasts alike gain a deeper appreciation for the challenges and ingenuity of medieval society, and for the ways in which people adapted to one of the harshest aspects of their environment, the freezing cold of stone castles. Medieval castle architecture and its impact on heat, stone walls and cold interiors. Castles were constructed with thick stone walls to withstand sieges and attacks. While these walls were excellent for defense, they were poor insulators. Stone absorbs heat slowly and releases it quickly, meaning that rooms stayed cold even with fires burning. Small windows, often covered with shutters or wooden panels, reduced drafts but also limited natural light. Castles were the defining architectural structures of the medieval period, serving as military fortresses, administrative centers, and residences for nobility and knights. While castles were primarily designed to withstand sieges and attacks, their architectural features had profound implications for the comfort and survival of the people living inside, particularly when it came to maintaining warmth during long, harsh winters. Stone walls, high ceilings, and sprawling layouts, while strategically advantageous for defense, made castles notoriously cold and difficult to heat. Understanding medieval castle architecture provides essential insight into how knights and other castle residents coped with extreme temperatures and adapted their daily routines for survival. Medieval architecture was deeply influenced by the socio-political climate of the time. Security, durability, and defensive capabilities were the foremost considerations in castle design. Thick stone walls, elevated battlements, narrow windows, and complex gate systems were implemented to deter invaders. However, these defensive measures came with trade-offs for domestic comfort. Stone, although durable, is an excellent conductor of cold. It absorbs and transfers heat rapidly, making interiors frigid during winter months. Moreover, many castles were located in regions with severe winters, from the mountainous zones of Central Europe to the northern plains of England and France, further exacerbating the problem. Knights and residents were forced to adapt to these architectural constraints using a combination of heating strategies, interior furnishings, clothing, and daily routines. Stone was the primary material used in castle construction due to its availability, durability, and defensive properties. The walls of castles were often constructed from large blocks of locally sourced stone, such as limestone, sandstone, or granite, depending on the region. These stones were held together with lime mortar, a mixture of lime, sand, and water, which hardened over time to create a solid structure. The thickness of castle walls varied, ranging from 1 to several meters, with the thickest sections typically found in defensive positions, such as curtain walls, gatehouses, and towers. While the thickness of stone walls provided formidable protection against battering rams, arrows, and siege engines, it created a major obstacle to heat retention. Stone has a high thermal conductivity, meaning it easily absorbs heat from its surroundings and releases it quickly. As a result, even when fireplaces or braziers were used inside a room, much of the heat was absorbed by the stone walls and lost to the external environment. In winter, when temperatures outside were low, stone walls essentially acted as heat sinks, pulling warmth away from the interior spaces and leaving rooms cold and drafty. Furthermore, the stone walls were often unadorned and lacked insulation. While medieval masons occasionally filled gaps with rubble or mortar, these measures were primarily structural rather than thermal. The result was a solid, defensible structure that was inhospitable to warmth, requiring castle inhabitants to develop additional methods to make living spaces bearable. The problem of thermal mass. The concept of thermal mass explains why stone walls were both a blessing and a curse. Thermal mass refers to a material's ability to absorb, store, and release heat. In theory, the thick stone walls of a castle could retain warmth if heated over long periods. For example, a continuous fire in a large hearth could gradually raise the temperature of the walls, allowing them to radiate heat back into the room. However, in practice, maintaining such fires required constant attention and a significant supply of fuel. Most medieval castles could not sustain large continuous fires in all rooms due to fuel limitations, staff availability, and logistical challenges. Consequently, the stone walls remained cold for most of the winter, absorbing heat from the fires only sporadically. The high thermal mass also contributed to slow warming of the rooms. When residents first lit a fire in the morning or after a day of absence, it could take hours before the walls absorbed enough heat to make the room feel warmer. This slow response made daily life uncomfortable and required careful planning regarding fire maintenance, room usage, and sleeping arrangements. Drafts and cold air circulation. Stone walls alone were not the only factor contributing to cold interiors. The design of castles, including large halls, corridors, and staircases, facilitated the circulation of cold air. While narrow arrow slits and small windows minimized vulnerabilities to attack, they did little to prevent drafts. Cracks in masonry, poorly fitted doors, and gaps around wooden shutters allowed cold air to penetrate interiors, further lowering temperatures. High ceilings in great halls created additional challenges. Warm air from fireplaces naturally rises, leaving the lower levels relatively cooler. In some cases, smoke from hearths also mixed with rising warm air, reducing the efficiency of heating while creating an uncomfortable indoor environment. Knights and castle residents had to contend not only with cold stone walls, but also with moving drafts and uneven distribution of heat, which made simple tasks such as eating, sleeping, or reading by firelight more challenging. Window design and light versus heat. Windows in medieval castles were intentionally small for defensive purposes. Narrow arrow slits and small openings minimized the risk of invasion and projectiles entering the castle. However, these design features severely limited the penetration of sunlight, which could have provided natural warmth during the day. Stone frames and wooden shutters, while essential for security, further blocked heat retention. In effect, castles sacrificed passive solar heating for defense, creating interiors that remained cold even on sunny winter days. Stained glass and leaded window designs, more common in the later Middle Ages, added a slight insulation benefit but did not significantly impact the overall thermal comfort of rooms. To combat these limitations, residents relied on textiles, wall hangings, and curtains to reduce drafts and create localized warmth. Variations in wall thickness and heating. The thickness of stone walls varied depending on the castle's strategic importance and location. Curtain walls and towers were typically the thickest, sometimes exceeding 3 meters, while interior partitions could be significantly thinner. Thick walls were beneficial in defensive terms but worsened the heating problem in rooms situated near the castle's perimeter. Conversely, inner walls and chambers within the core of the castle could retain heat more effectively if they were surrounded by other heated spaces. Knights and castle planners often considered these factors when assigning rooms for daily living. Private chambers, especially those of high-ranking individuals, were typically located in areas that could be more easily heated, such as near large fireplaces or in the inner part of the keep. Servants, soldiers, and lower-ranking residents were assigned rooms closer to outer walls, where heat loss was more severe, reflecting both social hierarchy and practical heating constraints. Impact on daily life. The cold interiors shaped nearly every aspect of medieval castle life. Knights and residents adapted their routines around warmth, spending more time near hearths, gathering in common halls, or wearing multiple layers of clothing indoors. Meals were eaten close to fires and beds were strategically positioned near heat sources when possible. Communal sleeping arrangements allowed residents to share body heat, while servants maintained hearths throughout the day and night to ensure continuous warmth for high-ranking individuals. In addition to daily routines, the cold stone interiors influenced castle culture and social behavior. Hospitality, for example, was closely tied to the provision of warmth. Guests and visiting knights expected to be accommodated in heated chambers, often near tapestries, braziers, and well-maintained hearths. The ability to provide heat became both a practical necessity and a symbol of status and wealth. Scientific perspective, heat transfer in stone. From a modern scientific perspective, the challenges of stone walls are understandable. Stone has a high thermal conductivity, meaning it readily absorbs and transmits heat. Combined with low insulation, high ceilings, and open interiors, castles were effectively heat sinks. Heat generated by a fire would be absorbed by the stone walls and floors, much of it lost to the external environment. This created a constant struggle to maintain habitable temperatures, requiring ingenuity in fireplace placement, fuel management, and the use of insulating materials like tapestries and rugs. Moreover, the specific type of stone used affected heat retention. Denser stones such as granite conducted cold more efficiently, while softer stones like limestone absorbed heat more slowly, but still retained little warmth without continuous fires. Local climate conditions further complicated matters. Castles in northern Europe faced longer, colder winters than those in southern France or Italy, making architectural adaptations even more critical. Historical examples. Historical records provide vivid examples of the challenges posed by stone walls. Chronicles from English castles such as Windsor and Dover describe bitterly cold chambers despite roaring fires, with knights and residents relying on multiple layers of clothing, bedding, and wall hangings for comfort. French castles like Pierrefonds and Carcassonne similarly illustrate the combination of defensive architecture and cold interiors, where multiple fireplaces and braziers were necessary to sustain warmth throughout the day and night. Accounts also highlight social hierarchy and heating. Lords and knights enjoyed private chambers with multiple fireplaces and heated beds, while soldiers and servants were often relegated to outer walls or communal spaces, enduring colder conditions. These disparities underscore how architecture not only impacted warmth, but also reinforced social stratification within the castle. Stone walls were both the greatest strength and the greatest challenge of medieval castles. Their durability, defensive capabilities, and imposing presence came at the cost of interior warmth. High thermal conductivity, thick construction, and drafts made stone interiors cold and uncomfortable, shaping the daily life, routines, and social hierarchy of castle residents. Knights and inhabitants adapted through clothing, furnishings, communal arrangements, and fire management, demonstrating ingenuity and resilience in the face of an unforgiving architectural environment. The cold stone interiors of castles were not merely an inconvenience. They were a defining factor in medieval living, influencing architecture, social behavior, and survival strategies. Understanding these challenges provides a foundation for exploring the broader methods medieval people used to stay warm, including fireplaces, braziers, tapestries, and daily routines, which will be discussed in subsequent sections of this chapter. Large halls and high ceilings. The Great Hall was the heart of medieval castles, where lords, knights, and servants gathered for meals and meetings. However, its size and high ceilings made heating difficult. Warm air from a fireplace often rose quickly, leaving the lower parts of the hall cold. Early castles sometimes lacked chimneys, which caused smoke to linger and reduced the efficiency of heat. Fireplaces, chimneys, and heating systems. Early medieval castles had open hearths without chimneys, allowing smoke to escape through roof openings. Later, brick or stone chimneys were introduced, improving air circulation and heat retention. Some castles featured multiple fireplaces in private chambers, while communal spaces relied on larger hearths or portable fire pits. The castle's design, placement of rooms, thickness of walls, and number of fireplaces played a key role in maintaining warmth. Strategic planning was necessary to ensure that critical areas, like the Lord's Chamber or the Great Hall, stayed as comfortable as possible. Impact on daily life. Hearths shaped nearly every aspect of medieval life. Sleep arrangements. Beds were positioned near fireplaces or braziers to retain warmth overnight. Meals and cooking. Hearths provided the primary heat source for cooking stews, baking bread, and preparing hot beverages. Social interaction. Communal activities centered around warmth, reinforcing social hierarchies and communal bonds. Clothing and furnishings. Residents relied on layered clothing, curtains, tapestries, and rugs to supplement the hearth's heat. The combination of architectural design, fuel management, and social coordination ensured that even the coldest stone chambers remained habitable. Heating methods in medieval castles. 3.1 Fireplaces and hearths. Fireplaces were the primary source of warmth. Large hearths, often located in the Great Hall, were tended by servants throughout the day. Firewood, charcoal, and sometimes peat were the main fuels. Fires served dual purposes, heating the room and cooking meals. Medieval castles, often pictured as cold, stone fortresses, posed significant challenges when it came to warmth. Stone walls, high ceilings, and limited insulation made heating a necessity rather than a luxury. Among the various methods developed to provide heat, fireplaces and hearths were central. They were the primary source of warmth, centers of social life, and critical tools for cooking. Understanding fireplaces and hearths in medieval castles provides insight not only into architectural ingenuity, but also into daily life, social hierarchy, and the practical skills required to survive harsh winters. Early hearths. In the early Middle Ages, castles and fortified homes used open hearths located in the center of large halls. These hearths consisted of simple stone or brick constructions with a shallow pit where wood or charcoal could be burned. Smoke from these fires escaped through a hole in the roof or a rudimentary vent, often filling the room with smoke before gradually leaving the space. Central hearths had advantages. They provided heat to the entire hall and a focal point for social activities, including meals, meetings, and entertainment. However, they were inefficient in terms of heat retention. Much of the warmth rose toward the ceiling and was lost through roof openings. Smoke, while necessary for venting combustion gases, reduced air quality and could irritate eyes and lungs. Introduction of the fireplace. By the 12th century, the introduction of wall fireplaces transformed castle heating. Fireplaces were built along walls with chimneys to channel smoke outside. This innovation allowed residents to enjoy cleaner air, more controlled fires, and better heat retention. Hearths evolved from open pits in the center of rooms to enclosed or partially enclosed structures that concentrated heat and allowed for more consistent warmth. The adoption of fireplaces marked a shift in castle design. Rooms could now be arranged to maximize the effectiveness of heat, and private chambers could be heated independently of the Great Hall. Nobles and knights increasingly demanded fireplaces in their private quarters, both for comfort and status, as the ability to maintain a fire reflected wealth and resource availability. Regional variations. Fireplace designs varied depending on regional climate, available materials, and architectural traditions. In England and northern France, massive stone fireplaces with large hearth openings were common, reflecting the colder winters and abundant stone resources. In southern Europe, where winters were milder, fireplaces could be smaller and often built with brick or lighter stone. The style, size, and frequency of fireplaces in a castle reveal much about local climate adaptation and the priorities of castle architects. Materials and construction. Hearths were typically constructed from stone or brick, which could withstand high temperatures and radiate heat efficiently. The floor of the hearth was made of stone slabs, sometimes lined with metal plates to protect against sparks and embers. The fireplace opening was framed by stone or timber mantles, which added structural integrity and aesthetic appeal. Chimneys, initially simple stone channels, evolved over time to improve smoke ventilation. By the late Middle Ages, some castles featured ornate chimney stacks rising above the roofline, which not only expelled smoke effectively, but also became symbols of status and architectural sophistication. Hearth size and placement. The size of a hearth depended on the room it was intended to heat. Great halls, often measuring several dozen meters in length, required massive hearths capable of burning large quantities of wood or charcoal. Smaller private chambers, servant quarters, and kitchens required more modest fireplaces. Placement was strategic. Hearths were usually located along interior walls to minimize heat loss through outer walls, and large halls might have multiple hearths at intervals to distribute warmth evenly. Smoke management. Managing smoke was one of the key challenges in hearth design. Early open fires produced copious smoke, which could accumulate indoors if ventilation was inadequate. Chimneys allowed smoke to rise above the building, reducing the risk of fire and making indoor air more breathable. Some castles also incorporated vented flues or secondary openings to improve airflow. Effective smoke management not only enhanced comfort, but also reduced health risks associated with prolonged exposure to smoke, such as respiratory irritation or illness. Wood. Wood was the most common fuel in medieval castles. Hardwoods such as oak, beech, and ash were preferred due to their high energy content and long burn time. Wood needed to be chopped, dried, and stored in advance of winter, often in large stacks or specially constructed wood piles within or near the castle grounds. The collection and management of firewood were significant tasks. Servants and laborers worked throughout the year to gather sufficient wood to sustain fires, particularly in colder northern regions, where winter could last several months. Inadequate fuel supply could force residents to conserve heat, huddle near smaller fires, or rely on alternative methods, such as clothing layers and bed curtains. Charcoal. Charcoal, produced by slowly burning wood in low oxygen conditions, provided a hotter and more consistent fire than raw wood. It burned cleaner with less smoke, making it ideal for indoor use. However, charcoal was more expensive and often reserved for high-status residents or specific tasks, such as cooking and blacksmithing, within the castle. Peat and alternative fuels. In regions where wood was scarce, peat was used as a supplementary fuel. Peat, harvested from bogs, burned slowly and provided steady warmth, though it produced a strong odor and required careful handling. In some cases, coal was available and used in later medieval periods, particularly in England, where accessible coal seams allowed for alternative heating. Hearth maintenance and daily operation. Maintaining a fire in a medieval hearth was a constant responsibility. Fires required attention throughout the day and night to ensure they did not die out. Servants, often assigned specifically as fire tenders, added fuel, stoked embers, and removed ash to maintain a clean, efficient burn. Hearth operation involves several practical skills: arranging logs to maximize airflow, choosing appropriate fuel combinations, and controlling the fire's intensity to provide heat without producing excessive smoke. A poorly maintained hearth could result in insufficient warmth, smoke-filled rooms, or accidental fires. Thus, successful hearth management was crucial for the health, comfort, and safety of castle residents. Hearths as social centers. Hearths were more than functional features. They were the social heart of the castle. In great halls, families, knights, and servants gathered around the fire for meals, discussions, storytelling, and leisure. The warmth of the hearth created a communal atmosphere, reinforcing social bonds and providing a measure of comfort amid the harsh stone environment. Private chambers with fireplaces allowed nobles and knights to withdraw from communal spaces, enjoying both physical warmth and privacy. The presence of a well-maintained hearth in a private room was a marker of status, signaling both wealth and sophistication. Symbolism and ritual. Hearths also held symbolic significance. The fire was a representation of life, protection, and stability within the castle walls. Ceremonial uses, such as lighting fires during festivals or important gatherings, reinforced the hearth's role as both a practical and cultural centerpiece. Architectural innovations for efficiency. Over the centuries, castle architects developed several innovations to enhance fireplace efficiency. 1. Chimney placement. Strategic chimney placement minimized heat loss while improving smoke ventilation. 2. Hearth depth and design. Deeper hearths allowed for larger fuel loads and better airflow, improving heat output. 3. Reflective materials. Some hearths incorporated stone or metal backs to reflect heat into the room. 4. Multiple fires. Large halls featured multiple hearths to distribute warmth evenly, preventing cold spots in long rooms. These innovations reflect the medieval understanding of heat management, even without formal knowledge of thermodynamics. They demonstrate the adaptation of architecture to both social needs and environmental challenges. 3.2. Portable braziers and fire pits. Portable braziers allowed residents to bring heat directly to themselves. These metal containers held burning coals and could be moved around rooms or chambers. While effective, they pose fire hazards, especially near tapestries or wooden furniture. 3.3. Tapestries and wall hangings. Stone walls conducted cold, so hanging heavy tapestries was a common practice. Tapestries reduced drafts, trapped heat, and provided insulation. Many featured elaborate designs, reflecting both status and aesthetics. 3.4. Floors, rugs, and bedding. Stone floors were cold and uncomfortable. People placed rushes, straw, or rugs on floors to provide some insulation. Beds were often raised on wooden frames and lined with straw, feathers, or wool. Curtains around beds helped trap warmth, offering both comfort and privacy. Clothing and personal warmth. 4.1. Layered clothing. Layering was essential. Linen undergarments absorbed moisture, while woolen garments on top provided insulation. Wealthier knights had fur-lined cloaks, hoods, and gloves. Layers could be added or removed depending on temperature. Medieval castles, while impressive in their size and fortification, presented formidable challenges when it came to personal warmth. The thick stone walls, high ceilings, and drafty interiors made staying warm essential for survival, particularly during the long and harsh winters of Europe. Knights, nobles, servants, and soldiers all relied heavily on clothing as a critical tool for insulation and comfort. One of the most effective strategies for maintaining warmth was the use of layered clothing. This chapter explores the intricacies of layered garments in medieval life, examining the materials, design, social context, and practical methods that allowed individuals to endure the freezing conditions inside castles. In medieval society, architecture alone was insufficient to protect against cold. While fireplaces, hearths, and braziers provided some heat, their distribution was uneven, and maintaining fires required constant effort and substantial fuel. Consequently, clothing served as the first and most reliable line of defense against the cold. Knights who spent much of their time in armor required additional layers beneath their metal suits, while civilians and servants relied on multiple garments to trap body heat. Clothing in the medieval period was not only functional, but also deeply intertwined with social status. Wealthier individuals could afford multiple layers made from high-quality wool, linen, and fur, while peasants and lower-ranking soldiers had access to simpler, less insulating fabrics. The quality and number of layers directly influenced an individual's ability to survive the winter months, illustrating the dual role of clothing as both a practical necessity and a social indicator. Linen was a fundamental material for undergarments in medieval castles. Made from flax, linen was soft, breathable, and absorbent, making it suitable for direct contact with the skin. Linen shirts and shifts formed the base layer, wicking moisture away from the body and providing a comfortable foundation for additional layers. Undergarments were crucial for maintaining warmth because they reduced heat loss by trapping a thin layer of air between the fabric and skin. In addition, linen could be washed more easily than outer layers, helping to maintain hygiene in an era before frequent bathing was common. Wool was the primary material for outer layers due to its superior insulating properties. Wool fibers naturally trap air, providing a buffer against cold temperatures. Woolen tunics, cloaks, and hose were essential garments for both knights and civilians. High-quality wool, often imported from regions such as Flanders or Spain, was softer, denser, and better at retaining heat. Lower-quality wool was coarser and less insulating, but more affordable, making it accessible to lower-ranking castle residents. Wool could also be felted or lined with fur to enhance warmth, particularly in colder climates. Fur was an additional layer for those who could afford it, providing superior insulation against harsh winters. Fur linings were sewn into cloaks, mantles, and hoods, creating a barrier against wind and cold. Wealthier knights and nobles favored luxurious furs such as ermine, sable, or fox, while ordinary soldiers might use more common animal pelts such as sheepskin. Fur was not only functional but also a marker of wealth and status. In some cases, sumptuary laws regulated who could wear certain types of fur, further emphasizing its dual role as both clothing and social signal. The base layer, typically made of linen, was worn next to the skin. For men, this included the shirt or chemise, which extended to the knees or mid-thigh, and linen underbreeches or drawers. For women, the chemise served a similar purpose, often extending to the ankles and forming the foundation for outer garments. The base layer's primary function was to trap a thin layer of air, wick moisture away, and provide comfort against rougher outer fabrics. Even knights, who would later wear multiple padded layers in armor, began with a linen underlayer to prevent chafing and provide minimal insulation. The middle layer was the primary insulating layer. This could include tunics, doublets, and padded garments. For knights, this was often a gambeson, a quilted and padded jacket worn beneath armor. The gambeson served multiple purposes. It absorbed shock from blows in combat and trapped heat close to the body, providing essential warmth in stone castles. For civilians, middle layers included woolen tunics, petticoats, and layered skirts or trousers. These garments were often loose-fitting to trap air, enhancing insulation. The middle layer was the most versatile, adaptable for both indoor comfort and outdoor activities. The outermost layer provided protection against wind, rain, and additional cold. Cloaks, mantles, and long coats made of wool or lined with fur were common. Capes and hoods shielded the head and shoulders from drafts, while gloves, mittens, and boots protected extremities. For knights, the outer layer included armor, which added weight but also created an additional barrier against heat loss. The combination of gambeson, mail, and plate armor, while heavy, formed a multi-layered insulation system that kept the wearer surprisingly warm in freezing conditions, particularly when active. One of the most significant sources of heat loss is through extremities, and medieval residents were acutely aware of this. Layered clothing often included specialized garments for these areas. Hats and hoods, woolen or fur-lined caps, hoods and coifs protected the head from cold. Knights often wore padded coifs beneath helmets for insulation. Gloves and mittens, leather or wool gloves kept hands warm while allowing for manual work. Footwear, woolen stockings or hose, sometimes lined with fur, and leather boots provided protection against cold floors and snow. These garments complemented the layered clothing system, ensuring that body heat was retained as efficiently as possible. The number and quality of clothing layers varied significantly according to social rank. Wealthy knights and nobles could afford multiple layers, high-quality wool, and luxurious furs. Their garments were tailored, lined, and maintained for optimal warmth. Servants, soldiers, and lower-ranking individuals had fewer layers and relied more heavily on shared indoor warmth from hearths and communal sleeping. This distinction had practical and symbolic implications. Well-insulated clothing not only kept the wearer warm, but also reflected wealth, status, and access to resources. In many castles, clothing was an extension of social hierarchy, demonstrating that survival strategies were intertwined with social organization. Medieval Europe spanned diverse climates, from the frigid north to the milder Mediterranean. Clothing layers were adapted accordingly. Northern Europe, heavier wool, multiple layers, and fur-lined garments were essential for enduring long winters. Central Europe, a balance between warmth and mobility, led to quilted and layered tunics with fur accents. Southern Europe, lighter layers of wool and linen were sufficient for cooler, but not freezing winters. These adaptations reflect both environmental necessity and cultural preferences, illustrating the ingenuity of medieval inhabitants in responding to local conditions. Layered clothing influenced almost every aspect of daily life in castles. Sleeping arrangements. Layers allowed residents to retain warmth during cold nights. Blankets and bed curtains further complemented clothing insulation. Work and duties. Servants, soldiers, and knights adapted layers for mobility and task-specific needs. Heavier garments were worn indoors, while lighter layers allowed for more activity outdoors. Social gatherings. Clothing reflected status during feasts and ceremonies, while providing necessary warmth in unheated halls. Travel. Layered clothing was essential for journeys in cold weather, providing insulation while accommodating the need for movement and armor. While effective, layered clothing was not without limitations. Weight and bulk. Multiple layers could be heavy and cumbersome, especially for knights wearing armor. Maintenance. Wool and linen required regular cleaning, a challenging task in winter months. Accessibility. Lower-ranking residents had limited access to high-quality fabrics, reducing the effectiveness of insulation. Mobility restrictions. Thick garments sometimes restricted movement, complicating tasks and combat readiness. Despite these challenges, the layered clothing system remained the most reliable and practical method for personal warmth in medieval castles. Layered clothing was an indispensable aspect of medieval life, particularly for those living in cold stone castles. By combining linen, wool, and fur across multiple layers, knights, nobles, and servants could retain body heat, protect extremities, and survive harsh winters. Clothing served as both a practical tool for warmth and a symbol of social status, with wealthier individuals enjoying superior insulation and comfort. The strategies of layering, combined with architectural heating, personal routines, and careful management of extremities, demonstrate the ingenuity and adaptability of medieval residents. Clothing was not merely decoration, it was a vital element of survival, shaping daily life, social organization, and the overall experience of living in frozen stone fortresses. Layered clothing exemplifies how medieval societies used available materials and knowledge to overcome environmental challenges, reflecting human resilience in the face of cold, unheated interiors and the relentless demands of winter. 4.2 Armor and padded garments. Knights wore padded garments, called gambesons, under armor. While armor itself was heavy, the padding trapped air and provided extra warmth. Armor, though designed for protection, incidentally helped retain heat. In the harsh winters of medieval Europe, the cold stone interiors of castles presented a formidable challenge for knights and soldiers. While fireplaces, hearths, and layered clothing provided essential warmth, a critical component of personal protection and heat retention came from armor and padded garments. These items, while primarily designed for combat and defense, had a dual function. They offered insulation against both physical attacks and the pervasive cold that seeped through castle walls. Understanding how armor and padded garments contributed to warmth provides a glimpse into the daily life of knights and the ingenuity of medieval clothing systems. The relationship between clothing and personal warmth was particularly crucial for knights, whose roles combined combat readiness with extended periods spent indoors in unheated or poorly heated chambers. Unlike civilians, knights were required to maintain readiness for battle while also enduring the cold of massive stone fortresses. Armor alone, though protective, did not provide sufficient insulation. To address this, Knights wore padded garments underneath metal plates, creating an early form of thermal layering that balanced mobility, protection, and heat retention. These garments, often crafted from quilted linen, wool, or other textiles, trapped air close to the body, reducing heat loss and making extended wear in cold conditions feasible. The most common padded garment was the gambeson, a quilted jacket worn under chainmail or plate armor. Gambesons were meticulously constructed from multiple layers of fabric stitched together, sometimes filled with wool, horsehair, or other insulating materials. The thickness of a gambeson varied depending on the climate, the wearer's preference, and the type of armor it supported, ranging from relatively thin jackets for mobility to heavily padded versions capable of absorbing significant impact. The quilted layers served not only to cushion blows, but also to provide a barrier against the cold stone and drafty interiors of medieval castles. Worn beneath chainmail, the gambeson also prevented chafing and distributed the weight of the metal links, enhancing both comfort and endurance. Armor design evolved alongside the development of padded garments. In the early Middle Ages, chainmail dominated, covering most of the body in interlocking rings of iron or steel. While chainmail was excellent at preventing cuts and stabs, it conducted cold efficiently, creating a chilling effect when worn for long periods in unheated halls. The combination of chainmail and a thick gambeson mitigated this problem by providing insulation, trapping air, and reducing direct contact between metal and skin. Knights often layered additional garments, such as woolen tunics, over or under the gambeson, creating a multi-tiered system that maximized warmth without sacrificing mobility. By the late Middle Ages, the introduction of plate armor represented a significant advancement in both protection and thermal insulation. Full-plate suits, constructed from interlocking steel or iron plates, covered most of the body, often including gauntlets, greaves, and helmets. While metal armor could feel cold when first worn, the padded underlayers absorbed body heat and prevented direct exposure to the chilling effects of stone walls and cold air. Helmets, particularly great helms or bassinets, were worn over padded coifs that insulated the head and neck. The combination of a quilted gambeson, padded arming doublets, and plate armor created a remarkably effective system for maintaining warmth during the cold months. The practical use of armor and padded garments extended beyond combat. Knights often spent hours standing guard, performing administrative duties, or moving between rooms in castles, sometimes in drafty corridors or unheated chambers. In these situations, the insulating properties of layered padded clothing proved invaluable. Even when inactive, the air trapped between quilted layers and metal plates reduced heat loss, maintaining body warmth in conditions that would have been uncomfortable or even dangerous without such garments. The multi-layered system also allowed for flexibility. Knights could add or remove layers according to activity level, ambient temperature, and the specific demands of their duties. The social significance of padded garments and armor should not be overlooked. The quality and craftsmanship of a gambeson, or suit of armor, indicated wealth, status, and military prowess. Wealthy knights could afford finely tailored garments with dense quilting and high-quality fabrics, enhancing both warmth and comfort. In contrast, lower-ranking soldiers or retainers often relied on simpler padded jackets or smaller pieces of armor, which provided some insulation but were less effective against extreme cold. This disparity highlights how clothing and armor functioned as both practical tools for survival and symbols of social hierarchy within the castle. Armor and padded garments were also adapted to the local climate. In colder regions, such as northern France, England, or the mountainous areas of Central Europe, gambesons were often heavily quilted with multiple layers, and additional wool or fur linings were sometimes incorporated. In milder climates, padding could be lighter to facilitate movement and reduce overheating during warmer months. This adaptability demonstrates the medieval understanding of environmental needs and the importance of tailoring clothing and armor to specific conditions. Maintenance and care of padded garments were critical for their effectiveness. Regular cleaning, repair, and proper storage ensured that layers retained their insulating properties and did not become compressed or waterlogged. Wool, linen, and other natural fibers were prone to absorbing moisture, which could significantly reduce their effectiveness in cold weather. Knights and their attendants devoted considerable attention to maintaining these garments, often storing them in dry, ventilated areas within the castle to prevent mold or deterioration. Similarly, metal armor was kept free of rust and fitted properly to ensure that padded layers remained effective beneath the plates. The combination of armor and padded garments also influenced daily life and personal routines. Knights needed to carefully plan dressing and undressing procedures, as putting on a full suit of armor with multiple layers was time-consuming and required assistance. Even for non-combat activities, knights frequently wore at least a portion of their padded garments, particularly during colder months, to maintain comfort and readiness. The garment's thermal properties allowed knights to spend extended periods in cold halls, watchtowers, or open courtyards without excessive discomfort, demonstrating the integration of clothing technology with medieval castle life. Furthermore, armor and padded garments contributed to nighttime warmth. In castles, sleeping arrangements varied by rank and availability of heated rooms. Knights could often retreat to chambers near fireplaces, but even then, padded undergarments provided additional insulation during sleep. These garments, combined with heavy blankets, bed curtains, and furs, created a layered system that minimized heat loss, allowing for restorative rest despite the cold stone environment. The dual function of padded garments, protection in battle and insulation in daily life, made them indispensable to the medieval knight. The design of padded garments was remarkably sophisticated. Quilting patterns varied to optimize both comfort and heat retention. Diamond or lozenge stitching was common, creating small pockets of trapped air that enhanced insulation while distributing pressure evenly across the body. Artisans considered both practical and aesthetic factors, ensuring that garments were durable enough to withstand daily wear and visually appropriate for the knight's status. In some cases, decorative embroidery or colored fabrics indicated rank, family affiliation, or military order, blending functional and symbolic purposes. Padded garments were not limited to knights. Servants, archers, and lower-ranking soldiers often wore simpler versions, such as short-quilted jackets or sleeveless vests, providing essential warmth without the expense or weight of full gambesons. These garments allowed for mobility and functionality while mitigating the effects of cold, particularly during winter campaigns or when stationed in drafty parts of a castle. The widespread use of padding reflects the medieval understanding of layering as a practical response to environmental challenges. The thermal efficiency of armor and padded garments also interacted with other forms of personal warmth. Layered clothing, cloaks, gloves, and boots complemented the insulation provided by gambesons and arming doublets, creating a comprehensive system for maintaining body heat. Knights often combined these layers strategically: lighter padding under armor for active combat, heavier padding beneath lighter clothing for indoor comfort. This flexibility ensured that knights could adapt to varying conditions, balancing mobility, protection, and warmth. In addition to cold management, padded garments provided comfort in other ways. The thick layers absorbed sweat, reduced friction from metal armor, and offered a cushioning effect against hard surfaces, such as stone floors or benches. The combination of warmth and comfort was essential for maintaining physical endurance and mental focus, particularly during long periods of guard duty, travel, or combat preparation. The integration of armor and padding illustrates the medieval approach to multifunctional clothing, where practical, social, and environmental needs were carefully balanced. Historical records and surviving examples of medieval armor provide further evidence of the importance of padded garments. Inventories of knights' equipment frequently list gambesons, arming coats, and quilted vests alongside mail and plate armor, emphasizing their integral role in both combat and daily life. Contemporary illustrations depict knights wearing multiple layers beneath visible armor, demonstrating the layered system that contributed to warmth, protection, and overall functionality. These sources highlight the sophistication of medieval clothing technology and the understanding of insulation long before modern scientific concepts were formally developed. The importance of padded garments extended beyond winter months. Even in cooler spring or autumn conditions, knights relied on insulated layers to maintain comfort in drafty halls or during outdoor activities. The adaptability of padded garments to different seasons and activities underscores their practicality and the medieval emphasis on multifunctional clothing. Moreover, the consistent use of padding throughout the year facilitated familiarity and proficiency in wearing and maintaining these garments, ensuring that knights could respond efficiently to sudden demands for combat or travel. The combined use of padded garments and armor reflects a medieval strategy of layered warmth, which remains relevant in modern concepts of thermal clothing. By creating multiple layers that trap air, provide insulation, and retain body heat, medieval knights optimized their ability to survive and function in cold environments. These garments, integrated with other personal and architectural methods of heat retention, formed a comprehensive system of protection against the environmental challenges of castle life. In conclusion, Armor and padded garments were essential components of personal warmth and protection in medieval castles. Far beyond their role in combat, these garments provided insulation against cold stone walls, drafty halls, and harsh winter conditions. Gambesons, quilted arming coats, padded coifs, and related garments created a layered system that trapped heat, protected extremities, and allowed knights to maintain mobility and comfort. The design, materials, and craftsmanship of these garments reflected both practical necessity and social status, illustrating the sophisticated integration of clothing technology into medieval life. Knights and soldiers relied on this combination of armor and padding not only to survive the physical demands of battle, but also to endure the freezing interiors of their stone fortresses, demonstrating human adaptability, ingenuity, and resilience in the face of environmental challenges. Head, hands, and feet. Since significant body heat is lost through extremities, hats, gloves, and thick socks were crucial. Fur-lined boots, woolen gloves, and hoods were common among those who could afford them. This focus on extremities reflects practical medieval knowledge about body heat retention. In medieval castles, the cold was not only pervasive through stone walls and high ceilings, but also especially harsh on extremities, the head, hands, and feet. While layered clothing, padded garments, and armor provided warmth for the body, special attention was necessary for these parts of the body due to their vulnerability to heat loss. Modern physiology tells us that a significant proportion of body heat can be lost through the head, hands, and feet if they are not properly insulated. And medieval inhabitants of castles, through centuries of practical experience, developed sophisticated clothing strategies to prevent frostbite, numbness, and chronic discomfort. Clothing and personal warmth for extremities were not simply about comfort. They were essential for survival, functionality, and daily activity, particularly in the cold, drafty interiors of stone fortresses. The medieval approach to protecting the head involved a combination of hats, hoods, and coifs made from insulating materials such as wool, linen, and fur. Headwear served multiple functions, preventing heat loss, shielding from wind and drafts, and in the case of knights, providing a layer of comfort and insulation beneath helmets. Woolen caps, often tightly fitted, were widely used by both commoners and nobility, providing a barrier that trapped a layer of warm air around the skull. For wealthier individuals, fur-lined hoods and caps offered superior insulation. These garments were sometimes integrated into cloaks or mantles, with extended portions covering the neck and shoulders to protect areas particularly exposed to cold air. Linen coifs, a lightweight but effective form of head covering, were often worn beneath more substantial layers, helping to wick away moisture from perspiration and maintain comfort during prolonged wear. The layering of headwear demonstrates medieval ingenuity in combining multiple materials and designs to optimize warmth, ventilation, and protection. Helmets, an essential part of a knight's armor, required particular attention for thermal management. A knight wearing a steel helm over a bare head would quickly experience heat loss due to the metal's conductivity. To mitigate this, padded coifs made from quilted linen, wool, or a combination of fabrics were worn beneath the helmet. These coifs not only insulated against cold, but also reduced chafing and absorbed impact from blows during combat. The combination of padded coif and helmet illustrates a dual-purpose approach: protection from physical danger and preservation of body heat. In addition, the design of medieval helmets, such as bassinets or great helms, allowed some airflow, preventing excessive overheating while maintaining insulation against cold drafts. Hands were equally critical to protect, as dexterity was essential for daily activities, combat readiness, and management of castle duties. Gloves and mittens were commonly used, crafted from leather, wool, or fur. Leather gloves, often lined with fur, provided both warmth and flexibility for fine motor tasks. Woolen mittens, sometimes reinforced with leather, were used for more robust protection in extremely cold conditions. For knights, gauntlets served a dual purpose, acting as armor while retaining warmth. Padded arming gloves or mittens were sometimes worn underneath gauntlets to improve insulation. The thickness, material, and design of hand coverings reflected both social status and intended activity. Wealthier individuals could afford intricately lined gloves with superior insulating properties, while lower-ranking soldiers or servants relied on simpler woolen or leather versions. Feet were among the most vulnerable parts of the body to cold, as they were in constant contact with cold stone floors, outdoor elements, and unheated rooms. Woolen stockings or hose were standard for warmth, often layered for additional insulation. Over these, leather boots, sometimes lined with fur or felt, provided protection against moisture and cold penetration. The design of medieval footwear varied by region and status. In Northern Europe, tall boots with heavy soles offered both insulation and durability, while in Southern Europe, lighter shoes were sufficient for milder climates. The combination of woolen layers and leather coverings created a thermal barrier, preventing heat loss and reducing the risk of frostbite. In castles, residents sometimes supplemented footwear with foot wraps, long strips of cloth wrapped around the foot for extra warmth. This simple but effective practice illustrates medieval adaptation to cold conditions using readily available materials. The interplay of head, hand, and foot coverings with layered clothing and armor was essential for maintaining overall body warmth. Knights, for example, combined woolen or fur-lined headgear, padded gloves, and insulated footwear with gambesons, arming coats and plate armor, creating a multi-layered system that optimized heat retention while ensuring mobility and protection. For civilians, servants, and soldiers not wearing armor, combinations of wool, linen, and fur in hats, gloves, and footwear provided crucial insulation, particularly during long hours spent in cold halls or performing outdoor duties, such as guard duty, hunting, or patrolling castle grounds. The layering principle, combining materials of differing insulation properties to trap air and maintain warmth, was central to medieval personal warmth strategies and applied consistently across all extremities. Regional variations in extremity clothing were influenced by climate, available materials, and social norms. In colder regions like England, Scandinavia, or northern France, fur-lined hoods, thick gloves, and layered woolen socks were essential for survival. In milder regions, such as southern France or Italy, lighter woolen hats and single-layer leather gloves were sufficient. These adaptations demonstrate the medieval understanding of climate-specific clothing, reflecting both environmental necessity and cultural practice. Access to materials like high-quality fur or finely spun wool often depended on wealth, trade connections, and social status, creating a hierarchy in warmth and comfort within castle populations. Head, hand, and foot coverings also played roles beyond practical warmth. Hats and hoods could signify social status or allegiance, with colors, patterns, and fur types reflecting wealth and family or military affiliation. Gloves, particularly finely made leather or fur-lined versions, were symbols of status and refinement in addition to providing thermal protection. Even footwear carried social significance, with taller boots and more ornate designs indicating higher status or wealth. The functional need to maintain warmth thus intersected with cultural and social norms, highlighting the complex role of extremity clothing in medieval life. Maintenance of head, hand, and foot garments was critical for their effectiveness. Woolen items required regular airing to prevent moisture buildup, which could compromise insulation. Leather gloves and boots needed treatment with oils or waxes to remain flexible and water-resistant. Fur-lined items required careful storage to prevent damage from pests or mold. The care and upkeep of extremity clothing were ongoing responsibilities, often managed by servants or the castle's household staff, emphasizing the labor and resources dedicated to maintaining personal warmth. The combination of extremity clothing with other warmth strategies created a comprehensive system that allowed medieval inhabitants to endure harsh winters. Hats and coifs trapped head heat, gloves and mittens preserved hand warmth, and layered socks and boots insulated the feet. When integrated with layered body clothing, padded garments, and heated rooms or hearths, these strategies allowed both knights and civilians to maintain comfort and functionality in stone castles. The careful balance of insulation, mobility, and social expression demonstrates the medieval mastery of personal warmth in challenging environments. Head, hand, and foot coverings also had practical implications for daily routines. Knights needed dexterity in their hands for handling weapons, reins, or tools, making insulated gloves that allowed mobility essential. Servants required warmth in their extremities to perform duties efficiently, from carrying firewood to preparing meals in cold kitchens. Even leisure activities, such as indoor games, reading, or social interaction, were influenced by extremity warmth, as discomfort in these areas could lead to distraction, fatigue, or illness. Clothing for extremities, therefore, directly impacted health, productivity, and quality of life within the castle. The medieval focus on extremities also anticipated modern understandings of thermal physiology. By insulating the head, hands, and feet, medieval inhabitants reduced significant avenues of heat loss. Combined with layered body clothing and padded undergarments, these measures allowed individuals to maintain core temperature and perform daily activities in environments that would otherwise have been debilitating. The careful design, material selection, and layering practices reflect centuries of empirical knowledge, demonstrating that medieval people were highly aware of the relationship between extremity warmth and overall health and comfort. Another notable aspect of extremity clothing was its adaptability to activity and environment. Indoor garments were often lighter or removed in rooms with fires, while outdoor garments were heavier, incorporating additional layers or more insulating materials. Knights and soldiers adapted extremity clothing for combat, guard duty, and travel, using combinations of leather, fur, and wool to balance protection, mobility, and warmth. This flexibility highlights the ingenuity of medieval clothing design, emphasizing multifunctionality alongside comfort and survival. Extremity clothing also intersected with other innovations for personal warmth in castles. Bed curtains, blankets, and heated braziers complemented insulated garments, ensuring that residents could maintain warmth while sleeping or performing sedentary activities. Clothing for extremities worked synergistically with these architectural and environmental adaptations, creating a comprehensive thermal strategy that addressed the challenges posed by cold stone walls, high ceilings, and drafty corridors. The combination of personal clothing and environmental management illustrates the medieval approach to holistic warmth, integrating clothing, architecture, and daily routines. Social and ceremonial functions also influenced extremity clothing. For instance, during formal occasions, knights and nobles might wear gloves or hats made from fine materials such as silk, velvet, or embroidered leather, balancing aesthetic requirements with thermal function. The integration of warmth and presentation demonstrates that extremity clothing was both practical and symbolic, reflecting status, taste, and cultural norms while providing essential insulation against the cold. In less formal contexts, simpler wool or fur items fulfilled their functional purpose without additional ornamentation, highlighting the adaptability of medieval clothing to different social settings. Finally, extremity clothing contributed significantly to survival and resilience in medieval castles. In winter, when temperatures could drop to extreme lows and stone interiors amplified the cold, head, hand, and foot coverings ensured that knights, nobles, and servants could continue their daily tasks without succumbing to frostbite, illness, or fatigue. These garments, carefully layered and maintained, were essential components of the medieval thermal strategy, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of human physiology, environmental adaptation, and material properties. In conclusion, clothing for the head, hands, and feet was a critical element of personal warmth in medieval castles. Hats, hoods, coifs, gloves, mittens, stockings, and boots provided insulation for the most vulnerable parts of the body, preventing heat loss and enabling functionality in cold stone interiors. These garments combined practical, social, and adaptive considerations, integrating material properties, design, and layering strategies to optimize warmth while preserving mobility and status. Extremity clothing worked in conjunction with body layers, padded garments, armor, and architectural heating to create a comprehensive system of survival and comfort. The sophistication of medieval approaches to head, hand, and foot warmth reflects both ingenuity and deep empirical knowledge, underscoring the critical role of clothing in daily life, health, and resilience within the freezing environments of castles. Social and cultural context. Warmth reflected social status. Wealthier knights and nobles had multiple fireplaces, private chambers, and expensive textiles. Servants and lower-ranking knights relied on communal areas and shared bedding. Fuel was valuable, so wealthier residents could afford continuous fires, while poorer residents had to conserve wood or coal. Clothing quality also reflected status, as only the affluent could afford furs or layered garments. Medieval heating strategies combined technology, social hierarchy, and cultural practices, illustrating the interplay between comfort and class. Understanding how knights and castle inhabitants stayed warm in the freezing interiors of medieval castles requires more than examining clothing, architecture, and diet. Heat management and survival were deeply intertwined with the social and cultural context of the Middle Ages. Castles were not merely fortresses, they were the centers of political authority, social hierarchy, and daily life. The ways in which warmth was distributed, shared, and maintained reflected social structures, cultural expectations, and communal norms that governed medieval life. Knights, servants, and noble families navigated both environmental and social challenges, and the strategies for staying warm reveal a sophisticated blend of practical adaptation and cultural practice. Medieval society was hierarchically structured, and this hierarchy influenced who had access to warmth and comfort within the castle. Nobles and knights occupied the most favorable positions in heated halls or near large hearths, while lower-ranking servants and soldiers adapted through proximity and communal clustering. The allocation of warmth mirrored social status, with wealthier individuals enjoying private chambers with supplemental braziers, furs, and bedding. These arrangements reflected both practicality and social custom. Nobles' positions near the fire not only provided physical warmth, but also reinforced their authority and visibility within the social hierarchy. Servants, who often had less direct access to prime heat sources, relied on group strategies and layering to conserve warmth, demonstrating the intersection of social position and survival strategies. Communal living was a cultural norm that also shaped thermal adaptation. Many castle activities were designed around shared spaces, such as the Great Hall, kitchens, and workrooms. These areas served multiple purposes, including social gatherings, meals, ceremonies, and defensive planning. By clustering in these shared spaces, inhabitants could combine body heat, maximize the efficiency of fireplaces, and maintain a sense of community. The practice of communal warmth was not purely functional, it was also embedded in social expectations. Dining, storytelling, and religious observances were often centered around hearths, blending the necessity of warmth with social cohesion and cultural rituals. In essence, staying warm became a collective activity, reflecting the medieval emphasis on interdependence and hierarchy. The cultural significance of feasting and communal meals also contributed to warmth strategies. Knights, nobles, and retainers gathered in the Great Hall for meals, which were as much social and political events as nutritional necessities. The presence of multiple individuals around the central hearth amplified heat distribution, while hot foods and beverages provided internal warmth. Feasts often followed structured schedules that aligned with environmental conditions, ensuring that residents gathered during the coldest parts of the day. Hot stews, roasted meats, and warming beverages were not just practical, they were expressions of hospitality, hierarchy, and ceremonial culture. Even the positioning of individuals around the table reflected social status, with the highest-ranking members closest to the fire in central hall spaces, reinforcing the intertwined nature of warmth, hierarchy, and social ritual. Religious practices were another cultural factor influencing heat management. Castles were centers of both secular and spiritual life, and prayers, blessings, and observances often occurred in rooms near hearths or in heated chapels. Monastic traditions, which influenced many aspects of castle life, emphasized structured daily routines, including meal schedules, work periods, and devotional practices. These routines were synchronized with both environmental conditions and the body's need for warmth, illustrating how culture, religion, and practical survival coalesced. Knights often participated in religious observances before or after meals near the hearth, combining spiritual duties with thermal efficiency. The cultural integration of faith and survival exemplifies the multifaceted role of communal spaces and social rituals in coping with winter cold. Hospitality and guest management were also central to medieval social norms, affecting how warmth was distributed. Visiting nobles, envoys, or other dignitaries were often provided with heated chambers, bedding, and additional furs, ensuring comfort and demonstrating respect. Hosting duties required the castle's residents to strategically allocate fuel, seating, and sleeping arrangements to accommodate guests without compromising the warmth of permanent occupants. This practice reflects both cultural expectations of hospitality and the technical understanding of heat management, highlighting how social norms dictated the organization of living spaces and resources during winter months. The role of servants and retainers in maintaining warmth underscores the social hierarchy embedded in castle life. Servants were responsible for fire management, tending braziers, delivering hot meals, and ensuring that nobles and knights remained comfortable. These duties required knowledge of fuel efficiency, spatial arrangements, and timing, demonstrating that thermal management was a skilled and essential aspect of service. While servants often had less access to direct heat, their labor ensured that the social and functional hierarchy of the castle could operate efficiently. The interplay between social roles and survival strategies highlights how medieval warmth management was both practical and culturally structured. Cultural attitudes toward clothing and personal adornment also influenced strategies for warmth. Garments, armor, and furs were indicators of status, profession, and wealth, with thicker and more luxurious materials reserved for higher-ranking individuals. Knights wore layered clothing beneath armor, combining aesthetic, protective, and thermal functions. Padded garments, wool tunics, and fur linings were both practical for warmth and culturally significant, symbolizing readiness, wealth, and rank. Servants and lower-ranking soldiers relied on simpler woolen garments and layering techniques, reflecting their social position while still enabling functional thermal protection. Clothing thus served as a medium where cultural identity, social hierarchy, and environmental adaptation intersected. The organization of sleeping arrangements was deeply intertwined with social norms. Nobles often had private chambers near heat sources, while knights' retinues and servants shared dormitories or communal sleeping areas. Sleeping in groups not only conserved body heat, but also reinforced social bonds and hierarchical structures. Wealthier residents had access to heavier bedding, furs, and strategically placed beds, while servants used layering, body proximity, and additional blankets to maintain warmth. These arrangements illustrate how cultural conventions and practical survival strategies were mutually reinforcing, with thermal comfort shaped by both social status and environmental necessity. Military culture played a central role in shaping warmth strategies as well. Knights and soldiers required physical fitness and readiness, even during winter. Training routines were adjusted to maintain metabolic heat, and armor maintenance often involved heating metal near fires before use. Socially, martial culture dictated that knights demonstrate endurance and resilience, integrating the physical act of staying warm with the demonstration of personal and professional competence. Activities that generated heat, such as swordplay or armor drills, were embedded in social expectations, linking physical survival with cultural performance. Ceremonial and festival events also had implications for warmth strategies. Medieval castles celebrated religious holidays, seasonal festivals, and feasts with gatherings that concentrated residents around heated spaces. The act of communal celebration served both social and thermal functions, allowing participants to enjoy warmth while reinforcing social cohesion and cultural identity. These events often involved music, storytelling, and pageantry, blending entertainment with practical adaptation. The cultural calendar thus dictated patterns of communal warmth, with rituals providing structured opportunities to maximize heat distribution while maintaining social order. Education and apprenticeship systems within castles also reflected the intersection of culture and warmth management. Young pages, squires, and apprentices often lived and trained alongside older knights, sharing rooms and workspaces. This arrangement conserved heat, provided mentorship, and reinforced hierarchical structures. Education in martial, domestic, and administrative skills was intertwined with practical knowledge of survival, including clothing management, fire tending, and daily routines optimized for seasonal cold. Learning to stay warm was thus an embedded component of cultural training, reflecting the holistic approach of medieval society to environmental adaptation. The design of castles itself reflected social and cultural priorities regarding warmth. Great halls, kitchens, chapels, and sleeping chambers were positioned to facilitate both hierarchical access to heat and communal clustering. Tapestries, wooden panels, and curtains were installed not only for aesthetic and ceremonial purposes, but also to reduce drafts and retain heat, demonstrating the integration of culture, social function, and practical adaptation. Even minor architectural features, such as window shutters, alcoves, and bed screens, were designed to accommodate social norms while enhancing thermal efficiency. These design choices underscore the cultural sophistication underlying practical survival strategies. Resource allocation was also guided by social and cultural considerations. Firewood, furs, and bedding were carefully distributed according to hierarchy, activity schedules, and social priorities. Nobles and knights received preferential access to fuel and insulation, while communal areas were heated to ensure shared warmth among lower-ranking residents. Cultural values of hospitality, loyalty, and service dictated how these resources were managed, ensuring that the castle functioned efficiently as both a defensive structure and a social organism. Thermal adaptation was therefore inseparable from the moral and social frameworks of medieval life. The interplay between gender and warmth management was also significant. Noblewomen, ladies-in-waiting, and female servants played key roles in organizing household activities, tending fires, preparing hot meals, and managing bedding. Their work ensured the comfort and survival of the household, reflecting both practical skill and cultural expectations of domestic responsibility. Similarly, male knights and soldiers managed training, armor maintenance, and defense, while adapting clothing and activity to maintain warmth. These gendered divisions of labor illustrate how social roles inform thermal strategies within the castle. Psychological and cultural perceptions of cold also influenced adaptation strategies. Cold was not merely a physical discomfort, it was associated with hardship, vulnerability, and moral discipline. Medieval literature, chronicles, and accounts often describe endurance in cold conditions as a marker of resilience, courage, and virtue. Knights were expected to withstand harsh winters with fortitude, integrating survival strategies into a broader cultural narrative of heroism and social duty. Communal practices, hierarchical arrangements, and ritualized activities thus reinforced both physical survival and cultural identity, linking warmth management with social meaning. The role of rituals and daily routines cannot be overstated. Structured meal times, prayer schedules, training exercises, and ceremonial gatherings were all synchronized with heating practices to maximize warmth. Knights in residence followed predictable patterns, allowing fires to be lit and maintained efficiently while ensuring that communal and individual activities were aligned with thermal needs. The rhythm of daily life in the castle was both a cultural practice and a survival mechanism, demonstrating the inseparability of social order and environmental adaptation. Trade, supply, and seasonal resource management were also culturally mediated. The availability of fuel, food, and furs depended on social networks, economic exchange, and political alliances. Knights and castle lords negotiated these resources strategically, ensuring that their households could remain habitable during winter. Social and economic hierarchies determined access to high-quality materials, while communal stores were managed to benefit both the household and retinue. Thermal adaptation was therefore a product not only of local ingenuity, but of broader social and economic systems embedded within medieval culture. Even leisure activities were influenced by the social and cultural context of warmth. Storytelling, music, games, and crafts were often performed near fireplaces or in communal halls, combining entertainment with thermal efficiency. These practices reinforced bonds between knights, retainers, and servants while providing psychological comfort and distraction from harsh winter conditions. Leisure became a strategy for warmth in both the physical and emotional sense, illustrating the integration of culture and survival. In conclusion, the strategies that allowed knights and castle residents to stay warm in frozen medieval fortresses were deeply embedded in social and cultural contexts. Hierarchy determined access to heat and resources, communal practices reinforced social cohesion, and ritualized routines synchronized with environmental conditions. Clothing, diet, activity, architecture, and resource management were all shaped by cultural norms, reflecting the interdependence of survival, social structure, and identity. Knight's endurance of winter cold was not only a practical necessity, but also a cultural performance, reinforcing virtue, status, and community. The integration of social, cultural, and environmental knowledge demonstrates the sophistication of medieval life and the ingenuity with which castle inhabitants adapted to the challenges of cold stone fortresses. Windsor Castle, England. Windsor Castle, a royal residence since the 11th century, demonstrates advanced heating for its time. Multiple fireplaces, heated chambers, and tapestries allowed the royal family and knights to endure cold winters. Staff worked continuously to maintain fires and manage wood supplies. Windsor Castle, located in the county of Berkshire, England, is one of the most renowned and historically significant medieval fortresses in the country. Originally founded in the 11th century by William the Conqueror, it has served continuously as a royal residence, military stronghold, and administrative center for nearly a millennium. The castle's strategic location overlooking the River Thames and its elevated position on a chalk hill made it both defensible and imposing. But these same architectural advantages contributed to the formidable cold experienced within its stone walls during winter months. For knights, soldiers, and domestic staff living and working at Windsor Castle, staying warm was an ongoing challenge, demanding a combination of architectural adaptations, heating methods, layered clothing, diet, physical activity, and social strategies. The study of Windsor Castle provides a compelling case for understanding medieval thermal management in one of England's most significant royal strongholds. The architecture of Windsor Castle played a crucial role in both the distribution of warmth and the difficulty of maintaining comfort. Constructed predominantly of stone, with thick curtain walls, towers, and high ceilings, the castle was extremely durable against attack, but notoriously cold in winter. Stone, while excellent for defense, has poor insulating properties, causing interior spaces to remain chilly even during prolonged fire use. The castle's many towers, including the Round Tower, created vertical spaces that allowed heat to rise, leaving lower levels drafty and cold. Large windows, often unglazed or fitted with thin oiled parchment in earlier centuries, let in considerable cold air, particularly during winter storms. Knights stationed within Windsor Castle had to contend with these architectural realities, relying on heating strategies, clothing, and communal practices to mitigate the severe chill. Fireplaces and hearths were central to Windsor Castle's heating strategy. The castle's great hall, kitchens, private chambers, and guardrooms were equipped with large hearths that provided the primary source of heat during winter. In the great hall, a massive central hearth could burn continuously, with firewood meticulously stocked and tended by castle servants. Smaller braziers and portable fires were used in private chambers to supplement warmth, particularly in areas far from the main hearths. Fire management required careful attention. Servants needed to monitor fuel supplies, maintain embers, and ensure smoke was vented efficiently through chimneys and flues. At Windsor, the spatial distribution of fireplaces was deliberately designed to provide heat where it was most needed, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of both architecture and human comfort in a medieval context. In addition to fire, textiles and furnishings played an essential role in insulating living spaces. Windsor Castle was decorated with heavy tapestries, draperies, and wall hangings, which served multiple purposes. Beyond their aesthetic and symbolic functions, these textiles acted as barriers against drafts and helped retain heat within rooms. Tapestries depicting historical and religious scenes were commonly installed in the Great Hall and private chambers, providing both visual interest and thermal insulation. Rugs, rushes, and straw coverings on floors further reduced heat loss and prevented occupants from direct contact with cold stone surfaces. Furs and blankets on beds and seating areas allowed knights and nobles to preserve body heat during long evenings and freezing nights, highlighting the interplay between decoration, status, and practical survival. Clothing at Windsor Castle was similarly adapted to the extreme cold. Knights and soldiers wore layered garments, including linen undergarments, wool tunics, padded gambesons, and fur-lined cloaks. The layers were designed to trap heat while maintaining mobility, allowing wearers to perform both martial duties and domestic routines without excessive restriction. Armor, when worn indoors or during training, required additional padded layers to prevent cold metal from chilling the body. In winter, heavier cloaks, gloves, and fur-lined boots were standard, while summer months saw lighter wool and linen garments. Clothing at Windsor Castle not only reflected social status and rank, but also served as a critical tool for thermal regulation, demonstrating the integration of fashion, function, and survival. Diet and nutrition were equally important for maintaining warmth in the frozen corridors of Windsor Castle. Winter months required calorically dense meals to fuel metabolism and generate internal heat. Knights and nobles consumed hearty portions of roasted meats, stews, bread, cheese, and legumes, often accompanied by warm beverages such as mulled wine, hot ale, or spiced broths. Preserved foods, including salted pork, smoked fish, and dried fruits, provided reliable nutrition when fresh supplies were limited. Hot meals were consumed strategically, often before or after training, patrols, or ceremonial duties, ensuring that metabolic heat supported both activity and comfort. Castle staff similarly relied on robust diets to sustain the labor-intensive tasks of fire tending, meal preparation, and maintenance, reflecting a holistic approach to winter survival. Physical activity was a key complement to diet and clothing. Knights at Windsor Castle engaged in regular training routines, including sword practice, horseback drills, archery, and other martial exercises, which generated body heat and maintained readiness for military action. Even indoor chores such as tending fires, moving supplies, and maintaining armor contributed to warmth. For servants and lower-ranking personnel, labor-intensive work was both necessary and beneficial, as the combination of movement and layered clothing allowed them to remain warmer than if they had remained sedentary. The synergy between activity and thermal retention was a crucial aspect of daily life at Windsor Castle, ensuring that all inhabitants could endure cold winters without succumbing to hypothermia or fatigue. Communal living arrangements further enhanced warmth. Knights, retainers, and domestic staff often shared sleeping and workspaces, clustering together to conserve body heat. The Great Hall, kitchens, guard rooms, and communal chambers provided opportunities for shared warmth, with proximity to fires maximizing heat retention. Social norms encouraged cooperation and coordinated schedules for mealtimes, religious observances, and labor duties, ensuring that heat was distributed efficiently. Even ceremonial activities, such as feasts, prayers, and tournaments, were organized with seasonal temperatures in mind, reinforcing the integration of culture, social hierarchy, and practical survival strategies. The castle's architectural modifications over time also illustrate how Windsor adapted to cold winters. In the later medieval period, improvements such as glazed windows, enhanced chimney systems, and the addition of private chambers with smaller hearths allowed for better heat control. The Round Tower, Central Keep, and royal apartments were retrofitted to provide more insulated living spaces, demonstrating that even in the Middle Ages, thermal comfort was a priority for both strategic and domestic reasons. Nobles and knights could now enjoy warmer private spaces, while communal halls continued to serve the needs of staff and retainers. These developments reflect a long-term understanding of the importance of warmth for both morale and survival. Winter preparations at Windsor Castle were extensive and culturally significant. Firewood and fuel stores were stockpiled in autumn to ensure that the castle remained habitable during prolonged cold spells. Servants organized provisions of dried foods, salted meats, and grains, while furs and textiles were rotated and repaired to ensure maximum insulation. Seasonal adjustments were embedded in the castle's routines, with daily schedules, training exercises, and social activities aligned to minimize exposure to extreme cold. The meticulous planning required to survive a Windsor winter underscores the sophistication and resilience of medieval castle management. Social and cultural factors were tightly linked to thermal adaptation at Windsor Castle. Nobles and knights were expected to demonstrate endurance, resilience, and leadership, even in harsh conditions. Fireplaces and seating arrangements in the Great Hall reflected hierarchical structures, with the most prominent individuals closest to heat sources. Servants' labor ensured that these social norms were maintained, demonstrating the interdependence of social hierarchy and survival. Hospitality was another cultural consideration. Visiting dignitaries received heated chambers, hot meals, and additional bedding, reflecting both the practical and ceremonial importance of warmth in medieval society. Religious life at Windsor Castle also influenced heat management. Chapels, private prayer rooms, and communal devotional spaces were strategically located near hearths or supplemented with braziers to allow for comfortable worship during winter months. Structured prayer schedules were aligned with meals and labor routines, ensuring that participants could remain warm while fulfilling spiritual obligations. Religious festivals and feast days often coincided with communal gatherings near heated areas, blending ceremonial observance with practical adaptation. The integration of spirituality and thermal management highlights the holistic nature of castle life, where cultural, social, and environmental factors intersected. In addition to the Great Hall and royal apartments, Windsor Castle featured numerous service areas, including kitchens, workshops, and guardrooms, each with specific heating strategies. Kitchens maintained continuous fires for both cooking and warmth, while workshops and guardrooms relied on portable braziers. Knights and soldiers rotated duties in these spaces to stay active and warm, reflecting an understanding of metabolic heat as an essential component of winter survival. Servants moved strategically between work areas, delivering hot meals, replenishing fires, and assisting nobles, demonstrating how labor, social structure, and environmental adaptation were interdependent. Clothing, diet, activity, communal living, and architectural design at Windsor Castle were complemented by seasonal rituals and routines. Winter schedules emphasized proximity to hearths, hot meals, and physical activity, while spring and summer allowed for lighter clothing, extended outdoor training, and less reliance on indoor fires. Nobles, knights, and staff adapted to these rhythms, coordinating work, leisure, and ceremonial activities to maintain warmth while fulfilling social and functional obligations. Seasonal adaptation at Windsor Castle illustrates the integration of environmental awareness, cultural norms, and practical survival strategies in medieval life. The castle's historical records, architectural studies, and contemporary chronicles provide further insight into thermal strategies at Windsor Castle. Written accounts describe the use of furs, tapestries, and layered clothing, as well as the importance of fire management and communal clustering. Archaeological evidence of hearths, chimneys, and sleeping arrangements corroborates these records, demonstrating a sophisticated approach to winter survival. Even artistic depictions and manuscripts of life at Windsor Castle emphasize the centrality of warmth, comfort, and hierarchical order in daily routines. The psychological dimension of warmth was also significant at Windsor Castle. Cold interiors and drafty corridors could be physically taxing, but social practices, communal gatherings, and structured routines provided comfort and security. The presence of fire, hot meals, and social clustering fostered morale, reduced stress, and reinforced social cohesion. Knights and nobles were expected to maintain composure and readiness, while servants' labor ensured both survival and social stability. Warmth was thus a practical, psychological, and cultural concern, reflecting the multifaceted nature of medieval life. In conclusion, Windsor Castle offers a vivid example of how medieval knights and castle residents stayed warm in freezing stone fortresses. Thermal adaptation at Windsor relied on a complex interplay of architecture, heating methods, clothing, diet, physical activity, social hierarchy, and cultural practices. Fireplaces, braziers, tapestries, and furs combined with layered clothing and high-calorie diets to mitigate the cold, while physical activity, communal living, and structured routines reinforced warmth and morale. Seasonal adjustments, resource management, and ceremonial practices further enhanced survival strategies. The social and cultural context of Windsor Castle, its hierarchy, hospitality norms, religious life, and labor organization, was inseparable from practical thermal strategies, illustrating the ingenuity and resilience of medieval inhabitants in enduring the cold. Windsor Castle remains not only an architectural marvel, but also a testament to the sophisticated methods developed over centuries to sustain human life in extreme medieval winter conditions. Château de Pierrefonds, France. Rebuilt in the 15th century, this castle features several hearths and heated private chambers. Its layout reflects an understanding of distributing warmth efficiently, with communal halls supplemented by portable braziers. Château de Pierrefonds, located in the Oise department of northern France, stands as one of the most remarkable examples of medieval military architecture. Originally built in the 14th century under the orders of Louis of Valois, Duke of Orléans, the castle combined formidable defensive structures with living quarters suitable for both nobility and military garrisons. Its location atop a strategic hill provided an expansive view of the surrounding forests and valleys, but the elevation and exposure to harsh northern European winters created formidable cold within its stone walls. For knights, soldiers, and domestic staff living in the castle, enduring winter temperatures required careful preparation, resource management, and adaptation strategies that integrated architectural design, heating methods, clothing, diet, and social practices. Château de Pierrefonds, especially in its reconstructed form by Viollet-le-Duc in the 19th century, provides a detailed lens through which historians can examine medieval life and survival strategies in cold stone fortresses. The architecture of Château de Pierrefonds played a central role in both the challenge and solution to maintaining warmth. The castle was designed with massive stone walls, high towers, and a series of keeps and curtain walls, which were excellent for defense but poor insulators against winter cold. Large halls, vaulted ceilings, and expansive rooms allowed cold air to circulate, making it difficult for fireplaces alone to maintain comfortable temperatures. Windows, often narrow for defensive purposes, limited natural sunlight and ventilation control, but they also restricted heat escape in comparison to larger, unglazed openings found in other fortresses. Knights living in Château de Pierrefonds had to contend with drafty corridors, cold stone floors, and frigid chambers, relying on a combination of fires, textiles, and strategic use of space to survive winter conditions. The castle's multi-level design meant that heat from ground floor hearths would rise, leaving upper levels less warm, a challenge addressed through clothing and strategic room assignments. Fireplaces and hearths were the primary sources of heat within Château de Pierrefonds. The Great Hall, kitchens, private chambers, and guardrooms were equipped with large, open hearths, often supplemented with smaller braziers in side rooms. Maintaining fires required constant attention. Servants and fire tenders were responsible for chopping and storing wood, replenishing fuel, and ensuring smoke was directed through chimneys without filling living spaces. In larger rooms, central hearths provided the main heat source, while smaller supplemental fires were placed strategically to warm sleeping areas and workspaces. The design of fireplaces at Château de Pierrefonds often included deep hearths and angled chimney flues to maximize heat radiation, reflecting both architectural ingenuity and practical knowledge of heat management. Fire maintenance was not simply a domestic duty, but an essential function for the survival and efficiency of the castle's inhabitants during harsh winters. Textiles and furnishings were crucial for insulation within the stone walls. Heavy tapestries, curtains, and wall hangings lined the Great Hall and private chambers, providing both decorative appeal and practical benefits by reducing drafts and retaining heat. Floors were covered with rushes, straw, or rugs to prevent direct contact with cold stone and conserve warmth. Bedding consisted of layered mattresses, blankets, and furs, particularly in the private chambers of knights and nobles. Furs, often imported or sourced locally from northern forests, were prized for their insulating qualities and used extensively in beds, seating areas, and clothing. These textiles represented a combination of wealth, status, and practicality, reflecting a medieval understanding of how to create microenvironments within otherwise cold, stone-dominated interiors. Clothing at Chateau de Pierrefonds was layered and functional, designed to trap heat and maintain mobility. Knights typically wore linen undergarments beneath woolen tunics and padded gambesons, with fur-lined cloaks added for outdoor movement or when interiors were particularly cold. Armor, often worn for training or ceremonial purposes, required additional padding to prevent the chilling effects of metal in winter conditions. Gloves, boots, and hoods were standard for both indoor and outdoor activities, while nobles and higher-ranking knights often had garments lined with furs or silk for additional warmth. Servants and lower-ranking soldiers used simpler layers of wool and linen, but relied heavily on communal clustering and proximity to fires to stay warm. Clothing at Chateau de Pierrefonds illustrates the medieval understanding of thermal regulation as both practical necessity and social indicator. Diet and nutrition were integral to maintaining warmth within the castle. During winter, the inhabitants of Chateau de Pierrefonds consumed high-calorie meals to support metabolism and generate internal heat. Hot stews, roasted meats, bread, cheese, and preserved foods such as salted pork and smoked fish formed the bulk of the diet. Hot drinks, including spiced broths, mulled wine, and warm ale, provided additional internal warmth. Meals were carefully scheduled around training, guard duties, and labor, ensuring that metabolic heat complemented physical activity and exposure to cold environments. For servants, kitchens, and laborers, the diet was both sustenance and a practical strategy for coping with the cold, as caloric intake was essential for maintaining energy levels during continuous work around fires or in drafty chambers. Physical activity contributed significantly to thermal regulation. Knights engaged in regular training and martial exercises, including swordplay, jousting practice, archery, and horsemanship. Even indoor routines, such as armor maintenance, delivering provisions, and tending fires, generated body heat and prevented the chilling effects of the stone environment. Servants and lower-ranking personnel undertook continuous labor, moving between kitchens, workshops, and sleeping quarters, which also contributed to warmth. Physical activity was not merely incidental but an intentional part of survival, demonstrating the medieval understanding that movement, combined with diet and clothing, formed a complete strategy for enduring cold winters. Communal living arrangements were central to thermal management at Chateau de Pierrefonds. Knights, soldiers, and domestic staff often shared rooms, sleeping quarters, and workspaces, clustering together to conserve body heat. The Great Hall, kitchens, guard rooms, and shared chambers provided opportunities for collective warmth, while structured schedules ensured that fires were tended and food prepared at optimal times to maximize thermal efficiency. Social hierarchy influenced positioning within these spaces, with higher-ranking individuals afforded proximity to primary hearths and insulated chambers, while lower-ranking personnel relied on communal strategies to maintain warmth. These arrangements demonstrate the combination of practicality and social order in medieval thermal adaptation. The architecture of Chateau de Pierrefonds evolved to improve warmth retention. During its reconstruction by Viollet-le-Duc in the 19th century, attention was given to historical accuracy while implementing features that enhanced comfort, such as improved chimney systems, glazed windows, and strategically placed hearths. Even in the original medieval structure, towers and keeps were designed with smaller private chambers that could be more easily heated and insulated. Strategic placement of rooms and corridors allowed for the concentration of heat in living and working spaces, while draft-prone areas were mitigated through wall hangings, wooden screens, and layered bedding. These architectural adaptations highlight the interplay of defense, social structure, and environmental considerations in maintaining comfort in cold conditions. Winter preparations were meticulously planned at Chateau de Pierrefonds. Fuel, food, and textiles were stockpiled well in advance to ensure survival during the harshest months. Firewood was sourced from surrounding forests, chopped and stored in dry areas to prevent dampness that would reduce heat efficiency. Furs and blankets were repaired and rotated to provide consistent insulation, while preserved foods ensured reliable nutrition. Seasonal planning extended to the organization of labor and leisure. Ceremonial events, religious observances, and training routines were synchronized with heating needs, demonstrating a comprehensive approach to winter survival that combined material, social, and cultural resources. Social and cultural factors were inseparable from strategies for warmth. Nobles and knights were expected to maintain endurance and composure in cold conditions, reflecting both martial values and social expectations. Proximity to hearths and placement in heated rooms reinforced hierarchical structures, while servants' labor ensured that social norms and comfort were upheld. Hospitality to visiting dignitaries and allied forces required additional heated chambers, warm meals, and enhanced bedding, demonstrating that thermal management was both a practical necessity and a reflection of social and political etiquette. Religious practices further shaped winter routines. Chapels and private prayer spaces were often located near hearths or supplemented with braziers, allowing for comfortable participation in devotional activities. Structured schedules for prayer, meals, and work ensured that inhabitants could remain warm while fulfilling spiritual obligations. Festivals and feast days, many of which coincided with the coldest months, provided opportunities for communal clustering and shared warmth, blending ritual, social cohesion, and thermal efficiency. Kitchens, workshops, and guardrooms were equipped with dedicated heating systems to facilitate labor while maintaining comfort. Continuous fires in kitchens supported both cooking and warmth, while workshops and guardrooms used portable braziers to provide localized heat. Duties were rotated to ensure that individuals remained active and warm, combining labor with thermal adaptation. Servants moved strategically between tasks, tending fires, delivering hot meals, and assisting knights and nobles, demonstrating the interdependence of social hierarchy, labor, and environmental adaptation. Clothing, diet, communal living, architectural design, and daily routines were complemented by seasonal adjustments. Winter schedules emphasized proximity to hearths, hot meals, and physical activity, while spring and summer allowed for lighter clothing and extended outdoor training. Seasonal rhythms were embedded in the daily life of Château de Pierrefonds, ensuring that all inhabitants could maximize warmth while fulfilling social, martial, and domestic responsibilities. Historical records, archaeological evidence, and artistic depictions of Château de Pierrefonds provide further insight into thermal strategies. Chronicles describe the extensive use of furs, tapestries, and layered clothing, while archaeological remains confirm the presence of hearths, chimneys, and communal sleeping arrangements. Manuscripts and illustrations depict daily life around fires, highlighting the importance of heat for both practical survival and social cohesion. These sources collectively illustrate a sophisticated approach to managing cold in one of northern France's most important medieval fortresses. Psychological and social factors also contributed to warmth. Cold interiors were physically taxing, but communal practices, shared meals, structured routines, and ceremonial activities provided both comfort and a sense of security. Knights and nobles were expected to demonstrate resilience and composure, while servants' labor ensured survival and social stability. Warmth, therefore, served practical, psychological, and cultural functions, reflecting the multifaceted nature of medieval life at Château de Pierrefonds. In conclusion, Château de Pierrefonds offers a vivid case study of medieval thermal adaptation. Knights and castle inhabitants relied on an intricate combination of architecture, heating methods, clothing, diet, physical activity, communal living, and social practices to endure cold winters. Fireplaces, braziers, tapestries, furs, and layered garments mitigated the harshness of stone interiors, while structured routines, labor, and social hierarchy ensured that warmth was distributed efficiently. Seasonal adjustments, resource management, and ceremonial practices further enhanced survival strategies. The integration of architectural ingenuity, material culture, and social organization at Château de Pierrefonds demonstrates the sophistication, resilience, and adaptability of medieval life, providing an enduring example of how human ingenuity met the challenges of cold stone fortresses. Ordinary knights' quarters. Smaller castles and knightly residences relied on a single hearth, thick bedding, and layered clothing. Historical accounts show knights sleeping fully dressed, sometimes with boots on, to retain heat. Portable fire pits were often used to add localized warmth. Ordinary knights, forming the backbone of any medieval garrison, faced a challenging life within the stone confines of castles. Unlike the royal apartments or the well-furnished chambers of high-ranking nobles, the living quarters of ordinary knights were functional, modest, and often sparse. These rooms were characterized by stone walls, narrow windows, and minimal furnishings, which made winter particularly harsh. Surviving the cold required careful use of heating sources, clothing, diet, activity, and communal practices. Examining the ordinary knight's quarters provides a vivid understanding of the daily struggles and resourcefulness of the medieval warrior class, demonstrating how they adapted to extreme environmental conditions while fulfilling military duties. The architecture of ordinary knight's quarters was designed primarily with practicality and defense in mind rather than comfort. Rooms were typically small, rectangular, or square in shape, with thick stone walls to provide structural stability and protection against attacks. These walls, while effective for defense, had poor insulation, allowing cold air to penetrate and retain chilling temperatures during winter. The ceilings were often high, creating vertical space where heat would rise, leaving the lower areas damp and cold. Floors were usually bare stone, sometimes covered with rushes or straw to provide minimal insulation against the cold ground. Windows were narrow arrow slits or small openings, designed to prevent enemy intrusion rather than to admit warmth or light. While these architectural features ensured safety, they made it extremely difficult to maintain a comfortable temperature, especially during northern European winters or in high-altitude castles. Heating in ordinary knights' quarters relied primarily on fireplaces and portable braziers. Large hearths were uncommon in smaller personal rooms, so knights often depended on shared or nearby hall fireplaces for warmth. Portable braziers, fueled with charcoal or wood, provided localized heat, allowing a knight to sit or sleep near the fire. Maintaining these fires required vigilance. The charcoal had to be kept smoldering, and fuel supplies had to be rationed carefully, especially during harsh winters. Fire placement was critical, as rooms with high ceilings or multiple drafts required the heat source to be strategically positioned for maximum warmth. Even with fires, the heat radiated only so far, necessitating additional measures to preserve personal warmth. Textiles and bedding played a crucial role in maintaining heat. Ordinary knights often had limited access to luxurious furs or fine tapestries, so they relied on layered blankets, straw mattresses, and coarse wool coverings. Furs, when available, were treasured and reserved for the coldest nights. Bed coverings were layered to trap body heat, and sleeping arrangements often involved curling up tightly to conserve warmth. In many cases, knights slept in proximity to one another in shared quarters, using communal body heat as an additional method of maintaining warmth. This practical use of textiles, while modest compared to noble standards, demonstrated an understanding of insulation and thermal retention in a resource-limited environment. Clothing was a primary tool for survival within ordinary knights' quarters. Knights typically wore multiple layers: linen undergarments, woolen tunics, padded gambesons, and occasionally fur-lined cloaks. The padded gambeson, a quilted jacket, was particularly important indoors, as it provided insulation against the cold stone walls and limited drafts from windows. Gloves, boots, and hoods were often kept on indoors during severe winter spells, as removing them could result in rapid heat loss. Armor, if worn during training or guard duty, was supplemented with additional padded layers to prevent cold metal from chilling the body. Even ordinary knights, with fewer resources than their noble counterparts, relied on layering and carefully chosen fabrics to maximize warmth in their chambers. Diet and nutrition were intimately tied to thermal regulation. Winter diets in ordinary knights' quarters were designed to support metabolism and generate body heat. Hot stews, salted meats, breads, and legumes formed the staple meals, supplemented by small portions of preserved fruits and vegetables. Hot beverages such as ale, broth, or spiced drinks provided both hydration and internal warmth. Meals were strategically consumed before or after periods of activity to maintain energy levels and body heat. In many cases, ordinary knights had less access to the rich, calorically dense foods enjoyed by the nobility, making careful meal planning and rationing essential for surviving long, cold winters. Physical activity was equally important for staying warm. Knights performed daily training routines, even during winter, including swordplay, spear drills, horseback practice, and maintenance of armor and weapons. Such activity generated body heat and improved circulation, helping knights withstand the chill of stone quarters. Routine chores, such as tending fires, fetching water, and assisting in kitchen or guard duties, also contributed to warmth. In smaller castles or fortresses with limited space, knights often performed indoor exercises to remain active when outdoor conditions were prohibitive. The integration of movement, diet, and clothing created a holistic approach to thermal regulation within ordinary living spaces. Communal living was a key strategy in ordinary knights' quarters. Shared sleeping arrangements, group activities, and close proximity to fires allowed nights to maximize collective warmth. In many cases, multiple nights occupied a single chamber, cooling their body heat during the coldest nights. Guard rotations were organized to ensure that individuals were never idle in freezing areas, combining occupational duties with thermal management. These communal arrangements reflected both necessity and the social structure of the garrison. Cooperation and shared responsibility were essential for survival. The seasonal adjustments in nights' quarters were carefully planned. Winter months emphasized indoor activities, warm meals, layered clothing, and fire tending, while spring and summer allowed for more outdoor training, lighter clothing, and reduced reliance on fires. Sleeping arrangements and room usage were adjusted to optimize warmth. Rooms closer to kitchens, hearths, or communal halls were prioritized for occupation, while isolated or drafty chambers were often avoided. Knights and their superiors developed routines that aligned with seasonal variations, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of environmental adaptation. Despite limited resources, knights employed innovative strategies to mitigate cold. Portable screens or curtains were sometimes used to create smaller, warmer microenvironments within larger chambers. Bedding was arranged to trap heat efficiently, with straw or rushes serving as insulation against cold floors. Personal items such as furs or clothing were rotated to preserve warmth, while careful management of fuel and fire placement ensured that limited heat was maximized. These adaptations reveal a blend of ingenuity, discipline, and practical knowledge applied in everyday life within the fortress. Social hierarchy influenced heat access within ordinary quarters. Higher-ranking knights might occupy rooms closer to the main hall or kitchen fires, while junior or newly inducted knights were often assigned the coldest or least insulated spaces. Nevertheless, communal practices such as shared sleeping arrangements and coordinated activity schedules helped ensure that even lower-ranking knights could survive the harsh winters. Proximity to hearths during communal meals and evening gatherings became an essential part of daily life, combining survival with social cohesion and maintaining morale within the garrison. Religious observances played a complementary role in thermal adaptation. Chapels, prayer rooms, and communal devotional spaces were often located near hearths or supplemented with small braziers, allowing knights to participate comfortably in spiritual activities during cold months. Structured schedules for prayer, labor, and meals ensured that inhabitants remained warm while fulfilling their spiritual and occupational obligations. Religious festivals, many of which coincided with the harshest winter months, provided opportunities for communal gathering, enhancing both warmth and social bonding. Historical evidence from castles across Europe provides insights into the thermal strategies employed in ordinary knights' quarters. Chronicles, household accounts, and inventories often detail the use of furs, blankets, and layered clothing, as well as the presence of portable braziers and shared fires. Archaeological evidence, including remnants of hearths, floor coverings, and sleeping arrangements, corroborates these records, highlighting the practical methods used to endure cold winters. These sources demonstrate that ordinary knights, while lacking the luxuries of higher nobility, developed sophisticated and effective strategies for thermal survival. Psychological factors were also critical. Cold, damp, and drafty quarters could be mentally taxing, but communal living, structured routines, and shared labor provided comfort and a sense of security. Knights were expected to demonstrate resilience, discipline, and composure, even in freezing conditions, while cooperation with fellow garrison members ensured mutual survival. The combination of social, occupational, and environmental strategies created a balanced system for coping with the harsh realities of medieval winter life. In conclusion, the ordinary knight's quarters reveal a complex and adaptive approach to surviving cold stone fortresses. Architectural limitations, sparse furnishings, and harsh environmental conditions required knights to rely on fireplaces, braziers, textiles, layered clothing, diet, physical activity, and communal living to maintain warmth. Seasonal adjustments, careful fuel and resource management, and social cohesion further enhanced survival strategies. Even in modest quarters, ordinary knights demonstrated ingenuity, resilience, and practical understanding of thermal adaptation, ensuring that they could fulfill both martial and domestic responsibilities during freezing winters. The study of ordinary knights' quarters highlights not only the physical challenges of medieval life, but also the interplay of social structure, resourcefulness, and environmental awareness that defined daily existence in frozen stone castles.